Hi, this is Don Farber, and I'd like to welcome you to this presentation on Sage Alerts and Workflow and how to become a data-driven organization. This presentation will take approximately 40 minutes. We're going to start off by discussing what it means to become more data-driven. Following that, we'll talk about the Sage Alerts and Workflow data-driven technology. We'll talk about its components and how it's licensed and priced. Following that, we will jump into the live Sage Alerts and Workflow solution so that you can see how the application works and how you can customize it to your organization's specific requirements. With that, let's kick things off. In your Sage 300 ERP system today, there's a heck of a lot of information constantly changing, and it's hard to keep on top of it all, whether it's invoices that are coming due, stock that's running low, delivery days, etc. If you're like most organizations, you periodically get reports dumped on your desk, after which you pull out your yellow highlighter pen and start paging through those reports one page at a time, highlighting just those records that require your attention. And the plain truth is that there's not enough time in the day to keep on top of everything that's going on within your ERP system. So the idea behind a data-driven organization is that you look at your ERP data for help. So that with Sage 300 ERP, you empower it to proactively monitor itself for critical, time-sensitive business conditions, automatically delivering the needed information to the appropriate people, and even automatically executing the appropriate response actions. The definition of a data-driven organization is one that empowers the data within your organization's applications to automatically drive awareness and drive actions that positively affect both the productivity and profitability of your business. Perhaps put into even more simple terms, I'd like you to consider the following question. When was the last time in your daily business activities you felt like saying, if only we had known? If only we had known that this particular client was so far past due, we would have resent them copies of their overdue invoices. We would have notified their sales rep. We would have placed them on credit hold. And that's just one example. Whether it's looking at contracts and leases that are about to expire, customers who have stopped buying from you or have changed their buying habits, scenarios like these are exactly why organizations today are adopting a data-driven initiative. Now, the good thing about this data-driven approach is that you're already more than halfway there to achieving it. You already know what conditions within your Sage 300 ERP data you wish to monitor. You already know what people within your organization and even outside your organization need to be made aware of these conditions. And you know what kind of actions you need to take in response to these conditions when they occur. You simply need to automate these three processes through technology. So, data-driven automation, it's kind of like a smoke detector for your organization's business data. That is, that a data-driven technology operates automatically. You tell it what business conditions to monitor for, how often to check for them, and how to respond to those conditions if and when they occur. Those responses typically include some combination of delivering alerts, documents, reports, and even triggering updates back into your Sage 300 system or into the other business applications that your organization relies on. So now let's take a look at one very specific use of this data-driven initiative. We're going to focus in the area of accounts receivable. Now in AR, there's a wonderful statistic called DSO. It measures the efficiency of your AR organization. The goal, to make your DSO as low as possible. What DSO measures is how quickly you get paid by your customers for the orders they've placed with you. And it's important to know that a data-driving technology helps you lower your DSO by automatically recognizing and responding to invoices that are coming due and also are past due. Now let's take a look at how this data-driven approach works with AR. First of all, the content is automatically driven. Content in this case being those invoices that under a data-driven approach are automatically generated and delivered to the appropriate people. At the same time, knowledge is driven, in this case to your sales reps, your account managers, who are automatically notified about their clients who are coming due and past due. And finally, actions themselves are automatically driven. In this case, delinquent past due customers are automatically placed on hold. Any process that's repetitive and manually intensive, such as invoicing and statement generation in AR, is a prime candidate to become more data-driven. There are 6 components to a data-driven solution, starting with, up at the top left, the automated monitoring of your Sage 300 and related systems, and going all the way through at the bottom right, automatic application updates so that your Sage 300 data is as up-to-date as your staff. We'll touch upon each of those in turn, as we now take a look at Sage's data-driven solution called Sage Alerts and Workflow. Alerts and Workflow begins by automatically monitoring your Sage 300 data for any business conditions that are important to you. And that last statement bears repeating: any business conditions that you can imagine in Sage 300, not just overdue invoices, late deliveries, stock that's approaching a reorder level. Any business condition that you can put words to can be automatically monitored, identified, and responded to by Alerts and Workflow. And although we're going to focus our conversation today specifically on what Alerts and Workflow can do for Sage 300, it's worth noting that Alerts and Workflow is an enterprise-level solution, so it can also monitor your other business applications. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later on in today's presentation. Alerts and Workflow automatically triggers notifications to the appropriate people. Now, most folks think of email alerts, and in fact, that is the most common alert delivery method, but it's by no means the only delivery method with Alerts and Workflow. What we're looking at the current slide is a web alert, which we refer to as a webcast, because Alerts and Workflow can publish alert details to any web page. Those details not only published there, but automatically updated by Alerts and Workflow. Imagine someone up in accounting have a web page up that constantly shows them all invoices that are coming due this week, or perhaps someone down in shipping, showing a dynamic list of all orders that are due to be shipped today, tomorrow, or over the next X days. The methods by which Alerts and Workflow can deliver these notifications is quite varied: email, text messaging to a cell phone, pushing information to a web dashboard, and the other methods that you see listed here. It's important to note that all of these alert delivery methods come with Alerts and Workflow. No additional hardware, software, or costs are involved. Now, sometimes when triggering an alert message, what's most appropriate is the delivery of a standard form or document. If a customer is delinquent and paying for an invoice, it would probably be best to resend that customer a copy of their invoice in PDF or perhaps HTML format. In fact, the #1 use of Alerts and Workflow with Sage 300 is to automatically generate order confirmations or invoices and automatically deliver them to the appropriate client, such as shown on the slide in front of you currently. And if we think more about the types of scenarios that you might wish to send alerts about, sometimes it might be helpful to send an analytical report. For example, if a customer has used up more than 90% of their credit limit, you might wish to automatically generate an AR aging report for that client and automatically deliver it to that client's sales rep. And so in that regard, it's worth mentioning the 2 different types of reports that Alerts and Workflow can generate, what we call scheduled and triggered reports. A scheduled report is a report that gets generated and delivered on a recurring basis, such as an hourly stock status report or a weekly AR aging report. A triggered report is a report that gets generated only when certain business conditions warrant it. For example, you might say that when a client becomes more than $5,000 past due, and those receivables are more than 60 or 90 days past due, if and when that condition happens, then you want Alerts and Workflow to generate an AR aging report for that client and deliver that report to that client's account manager. Now, it's also worth mentioning with Alerts and Workflow that it can generate Crystal reports, it can generate SQL Server reports, SRS reports, as well as also Sage Intelligence and Sage Enterprise Intelligence reports. Finally, in the area of content delivery, sometimes a picture is truly worth 1,000 words. So if Alerts and Workflow has identified a customer who has changed their buying habits, perhaps the most appropriate information that we could send to that client's account manager would be a bar chart or a line chart that shows that client's sales over the last 6, 9, or 12 months. These charts and graphs can be embedded within email messages, they can be FTP to a particular website, or delivered via a number of other methods. The final component in Alerts and Workflow is truly that workflow module. And when we say workflow, we mean the ability for Sage Alerts and Workflow to go back into Sage 300 or into other applications and actually add or update data. If in fact a client is delinquent in paying for their invoices, let's have Alerts and Workflow go back into Sage 300 and put that client on credit hold. If an item in inventory has dropped below its reorder point, let's have Alerts and Workflow automatically create a purchase order for that item in your Sage 300 system. So that is the Sage Alerts and Workflow solution, the 6 components that comprise it. I'd like to mention that out of the box with Sage Alerts and Workflow, you're provided with over 50 pre-configured business conditions within Sage 300 that the system can automatically monitor for and respond to. You can use any or all of those 50 plus events that come with Sage Alerts and Workflow. You can customize them, and of course, you can create an unlimited number of additional events of your own. So let's just take a moment to talk about a typical customer case study. An organization in this case named Toyo Inc., who are a multinational manufacturer of ink for printing presses. They needed to do a better job of keeping on top of what was happening in their ERP system. Specifically, they had a number of processes they wished to automate, such as invoicing and statement generation and delivery, and they definitely wished to reduce the amount of AR bad debt, the amount that had to be written off from their books every month. Toyo Inc. came back to us 6 months after implementing Sage Alerts and Workflow, telling us that they just passed over 20,000 alert messages to their customers, their suppliers, and their own internal staff. And that's quite a number of alerts. But what they provided us with next was most telling: quantifiable benefits. If you look down at the bottom of the current slide, you'll see that Toyo Inc. was able to quantify a savings of over 100 staff hours through the automation of many repetitive processes such as invoicing. At the same time, by automating those processes, they were able to see an increase in their monthly AR receivables by roughly $11,000. They also gave us a wonderful quote: "Alerts and Workflow does the work of 1 to 2 full-time staff. It is our invisible assistant." So before we take a look at the Alerts and Workflow solution itself, I'd like to share with you how Alerts and Workflow is licensed and priced. It's very important to note that Alerts and Workflow is not priced per user. Doesn't matter how many Sage 300 user licenses you have, doesn't matter how many people you have within your organization or how many you wish to notify. Instead, Alerts and Workflow is licensed according to the number of applications that you wish to monitor. So let's keep this simple. You wish to monitor Sage 300, all components, AR, AP, inventory, etc., and an unlimited number of companies. So let's assume that you wish to monitor Sage 300 for an unlimited number of conditions. You wish to trigger alerts to your staff, your clients, your prospects, vendors, and suppliers. You wish to deliver those alerts via all of the methods I mentioned previously, and you wish to use the workflow component to automatically update Sage 300 with the details of what has happened and what has to happen. You'd be looking at a one-time purchase price of just under $3,300. Again, that's a one-time purchase price. You would look to add to that roughly 20% or $650 on an annual basis for the maintenance and support. There is also subscription level pricing that's available should you wish to go that route. The only additional options for Sage Alerts and Workflow are whether you wish to monitor applications outside of Sage 300. Perhaps you've got a sales or CRM application you wish to monitor, or an HR application. To monitor one additional application is just under $1,800. To monitor two additional applications is twice that, and for 3 times that, you're granted what's called the Unlimited Connection License of Sage Alerts and Workflow, allowing you to monitor every single business application that you own today or ever will own. We surveyed roughly 1,100 customers a few years back to find out how long it took them to pay off their investment in Sage Alerts and Workflow. The results of that ROI study came back with just under 3 months, at 88 days, the amount of time it took the average Alerts and Workflow customer to pay off their investment in this solution. So now you've got a conceptual idea for what Sage Alerts and Workflow is and how it works. So at this point, I'd like to jump out of the PowerPoint and show you the application itself. Sage Alerts and Workflow. So a couple of general words about the technology. It's a server-based app. That means you typically install it on just one machine within your IT environment. Alerts and Workflow does not need a dedicated server. You could put it on your Sage 300 server, on your SQL Server box, on your Exchange server, or even run it on a workstation, which is what I'm demoing it to you from now. Alerts and Workflow runs under any Windows-based operating system, so that makes that a mercifully brief conversation. And Alerts and Workflow stores its data in a Microsoft SQL Server environment like Sage 300 ERP, and we also provide a couple of additional database format options in case you'd like to choose from them. Now, the way Sage Alerts and Workflow operates is, first and foremost, you pointed out the applications, or in this case, the application modules that we'd like it to monitor. You then identify the specific conditions that you want it to check for. You specify whom is to be notified, how the application is to respond to those conditions when they occur, and then you quite literally turn Alerts and Workflow on. It runs as a Windows service in a lights-out processing environment. Set it and forget it. Now, I mentioned that out of the box, Alerts and Workflow ships with over 50 pre-configured business conditions just in the area of accounts receivables. You can see the different types of conditions that it can check for. But for our demonstration today, let's take a look at a sample event. So, accounts receivable invoices. We've got an event that looks at invoices that are coming due within the next 7 days. Let's take a look at this event. Each event consists of up to 5 components. The first component is telling me whether or not the event is active and how often we're monitoring for this condition. For this event, we're checking for invoices every day at 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, in fact, I know that the schedule is a little bit more sophisticated than that. I know that this particular event does run every day at 9 a.m., but only on weekdays, because if there's not going to be anyone in the office on Saturdays or Sundays, there's no point in running the event then. Also, you'll notice with this event, it has something called repeat turned on. That means that when this event ran today at 9 a.m. and sent alerts about invoices that were coming due, tomorrow, if some of those same invoices are still unpaid, Alerts and Workflow will send another or repeat round of alerts. There's some business conditions where you only need to send out one alert for a given condition. But there's some other conditions whereby you need to keep on notifying someone until that condition has been addressed and resolved. Finally, when we take a look at this particular event, noting that it's running at 9 a.m. every day, you can easily change this frequency. Want it to run more often, every hour, every few minutes? You can choose those frequencies. Or perhaps this is too often and you'd prefer to run this event once a week or even less frequently. Alerts and Workflow ships with a wide selection of frequencies to choose from. Now, the second component of this event is its query or triggering mechanism. This event is looking at invoices that are coming due within a certain number of days. For this particular event, we're triggering on 7 days. It's easy enough to change the triggering threshold for a given event. Want to change that 7 to 3 days? As long as you're authorized for access to this option, you have the ability to modify the triggering parameters or thresholds. Now, I often get asked when I talk about the query associated with an event just how technical you need to be if you want to create your own query or if you want to modify the conditions of this query. Perhaps you have certain customers who always pay a little bit late, and so you wish to exclude them from this event's logic. Let's take a look at this query designer. And as we're doing so, I'm going to answer that question about just how technical you need to be. You don't have to be a programmer. You're not writing SQL syntax, but you do need to be familiar with an application's database schema. In the case of Sage 300, you need to know what data sits where. If you've ever written a report for Sage 300, you have all the technical expertise that you need. Alerts and Workflow here is automatically presenting me with a list of all of the files or tables in the Sage 300 system. I've chosen 3 tables to retrieve data from. Jumping ahead a couple of tabs, I can look at the individual fields of data that I'm retrieving from my Sage 300 database, such as the amount of invoices, the due date, the discount date, discount amount, etc. Alerts and Workflow lets you get quite sophisticated in terms of the conditions you want to check for. So, for example, if I wanted to total up the total that was due, for all invoices for a given customer, I can choose from functions such as summarize or even average. Alerts and Workflow provides a plain English wizard-driven interface for you to specify the particular conditions that you want to check for. Pardon me. For this particular query, we're also looking only at those invoices that have an amount due that is greater than 0 and that are due within a certain number of days. Everything here available from drop-down lists in plain English format. Note also on this Filters tab at the bottom right, the button called If Column Values Have Changed. If, for example, you're concerned that someone might be changing the due date of invoices, we can tell Alerts and Workflow to immediately begin auditing the value in that date due field. And Alerts and Workflow will automatically capture both the old value and the new value of that field whenever it's changed. I'm going to jump ahead to the Preview tab to actually test the results of this query. Let's look at all invoices that are coming due within the next 30 days, and we don't happen to have any. Well, that's probably either a very good sign or a very bad sign. Let's see if we go out a little bit further than that. So I'm going to click off of that tab, back onto it, and let's go out to a more generous number of days. Let's go out and look at 600 days in the future, just to make sure that our query is working, that it is able to retrieve records from my Sage 300 database. So let's take a look at those due dates. And I can see these due dates being out in 2019, so that explains why I needed to put in a higher value to retrieve matching records in terms of the number of days until they're coming due. So, the query identifies the conditions you want Alerts and Workflow to look for. The next step is to specify the content of the alerts you wish to send out. These alerts can go out via a number of different methods. You can see here I've got alerts going out via email, instant message, web dashboard, etc. Let's take a look at the instant message alert definition. Now, all of the fields from your Sage 300 database are listed for you. You can pick and choose which of these fields you wish to include in your alert message. Right now, this is a pretty short alert. It's showing us our invoice number in the amount of a certain amount and is due on a due date. It might be nice to include perhaps the name or ID of the salesperson or even the customer. So let's throw in the customer's name here. So let's say that invoice number for client, and we'll put in one blank space, grab our customer name, double click on it and add it to our alert message. Creating or customizing alerts is as easy as that. Now, certainly the most common alert delivery method is email, and it's worth noting that with alerts and workflow, emails can be in either plain text or HTML format. Do you need to have to know how to write HTML in order to create nice looking HTML email alerts? Absolutely not. Alerts and workflow ships with a library of pre-configured HTML templates that you can choose from. Okay, so let's just move this window over to the left a little bit. And what we can see is, in addition to these different alert delivery messages, we also have a report as well as a chart associated with this event. The report that's being generated is, in fact, our invoice form. After all, if an invoice is coming due in the next 7 days, probably be the best thing in the world to send the customer a copy of that invoice. That's exactly what Alerts and Workflow is doing here. We've chosen to have that invoice formatted in PDF format. Also, at the same time, this particular event is also generating a chart for us. And let's have a look at that chart. We'll exit out of this window. We'll go to the associated chart, choose to edit it. And this chart is going to show us an AR invoice total per sales rep. Let's have a quick look at that chart. And we can see that of all of our sales reps, Bill has the greatest total in terms of AR invoices that are coming due, almost $1 million worth of invoices. We probably need to hook up with Bill and make sure he's getting those paid. Again, these charts and graphs can be embedded within emails. They can be attached to emails or posted to a website for community access. So once you've specified all of the content that you wish to deliver in the form of an alert, the next step is to specify whom we want that content to be delivered to. An alert recipient is referred to as a subscriber, and this event has 4. We're notifying everyone in our finance group via both email and instant message. Myself, I'm being notified via email. And before we continue to talk about the dynamic subscribers, it's very important to note that all of your users and vendors, suppliers, and staff who are already set up in Sage 300 with email addresses and other information, that information is automatically and instantly retrievable from inside Alerts and Workflow. Excuse me. You do not have to specify user delivery information such as a person's email address or other contact details within Sage Alerts and Workflow because it's read dynamically out of your Sage 300 system. Now, the final 2 subscribers for this particular event are referred to as dynamic subscribers because they're going to change. Notice, we are automatically going to notify both the customer who has the invoice coming due and the salesperson who is responsible for that customer. Naturally, these 2 addresses are going to change. They're dynamic based upon which invoices are coming due for payment. The final component of an event is its workflow actions. This is where Alerts and Workflow has the ability to go back into your Sage 300 system, or for that matter, into other business applications that you might be using, and add or update details, such as scheduling a follow-up activity or updating the details of a recent transaction. Now, it's very important to note that this entire Actions tab is covered under an additional layer of security. You not only must be authorized for access to Alerts and Workflow, but you must be specially authorized for access to this tab because when it comes to writing data back into one or more application databases, you've obviously got to be very careful of whom you give that access to. This Actions tab is a combination of some wizard-driven APIs and some programmatic interfaces, such as including a Visual Basic scripting module within the Alerts and Workflow solution. We're also just on the cusp of a new release of Alerts and Workflow. With version 10 of Alerts and Workflow, we'll be adding the ability to make web service calls as a result of an event's conditions being met. So you've got an idea for how an event is configured, but before we leave the Alerts and Workflow technology, I just want to give you an idea of just how sophisticated Alerts and Workflow can be when it comes to identifying business conditions. And so we're going to look at automated trend analysis. And specifically, we're going to look at an event that automatically monitors and identifies customers who have changed their buying habits. This particular event, if activated, runs on the first day of every month. And what it does is it looks to see what each customer purchased for the month just ended. Then, Alerts and Workflow goes 6 months back for each customer to see what they purchased over that period of time, and Alerts and Workflow from that 6 months of activity derives a monthly average per customer. Finally, Alerts and Workflow compares what each customer purchased for the month just ended versus their average monthly sales to see if any customer sales have dropped by at least 30%, because if so, Alerts and Workflow is going to trigger the delivery of an alert message. And taking a look at the alert message, here's what it reads. Hello, salesperson. This customer of yours has placed orders for the previous month to date that represents a decrease of at least 30% over their average month. And in this email alert, we're showing for each customer what they purchased for the month just ended, what their average monthly purchase amount is, and the decrease, represented both as a dollar amount and as a percentage. Imagine if upon entering the office on the first day of every month, your sales reps could have waiting for them in their email inbox alerts about their customers who have significantly changed their buying habits. Okay, let's jump back into our PowerPoint for a few final slides. So a little bit of background, the history to Alerts and Workflow. It's been around for a number of years. It is currently in use by over 12,000 organizations worldwide. That makes it the most widely used solution of its kind on the market today. Now that 12,000 organizations number is impressive, but it gets even more impressive when you see that our technical support staff receives fewer than 9 incoming support requests a day. What that really tells you is that Sage Alerts and Workflow truly is a set it and forget it technology. Most of our customers we don't hear from but once a year when they contact us to renew their annual maintenance and support. Over the years it's been around, Alerts and Workflow has been the recipient of numerous awards and commendations. I won't go through them now. I will just point out my favorite, Forbes, an organization who know a thing or two about business, gave the Sage Alerts and Workflow technology their commendation for top productivity enhancing tool. And do keep in mind that although we've been focused on what Alerts and Workflow can do for your Sage 300 application, it doesn't stop there. Alerts and Workflow can also monitor and respond to conditions in add-on solutions that you've added to Sage 300, such as the Alltech document management solution. Sage Alerts and Workflow can monitor those documents and trigger corresponding alerts and responses. And then we go outside of ERP. If you happen to be using a CRM app, customer service app, human resources app, or even are using homegrown solutions, you can use Alerts and Workflow to monitor and respond to conditions in those apps. And that extends to even monitoring the content of incoming email messages. If your organization has generic email accounts like info@yourcompany.com, sales at, or support at, if currently it's someone's job to manually monitor and respond to those generic email accounts, consider replacing that and automating that process with Sage Alerts and Workflow. And so could Sage Alerts and Workflow benefit your organization? Well, you can answer that by answering the following 7 questions. Number 1, do you have a lot of date-sensitive information within your ERP system? Invoices with due dates, orders with delivery dates, promise dates, expiration dates, discount dates, and the like. Do you have critical business thresholds that drive your business decisions? If, for example, a client reaches 90% of their credit limit, then you want that client put on credit hold. A great example of a threshold-driven business decision. One of my personal favorites, inactivity monitoring. You know, we all tend to think about sending alerts and taking actions based upon something happening. But in fact, sometimes the most important information that you need to know about and that you need to take some action on isn't something that has happened, but rather something that should have happened, but hasn't. A customer who purchases from you typically month after month after month, and now all of a sudden 20, 25, or 30 days goes by, and that customer has failed to place an order with you. Exception management, the whole idea of making your focus on business be about those few things that are going wrong. You don't need to know about everything that's going right. Tell me just about the exceptions, that 1 or 2% of things that are going wrong. Does your organization use trend analysis in respect to your customers' activities, items, parts, products that you sell? And do you need to know when critical business information in Sage 300 has changed, such as a purchase order delivery date, a customer's credit limit or credit status, or other such critical fields of data? And the last question to ask yourself is the following. Do you have one or more manually intensive, repetitive processes that could and should be automating, such as the invoicing process, the process whereby statements are generated and delivered, and also such items as picking tickets, purchase orders, dunning notices, and the like. And so one last piece of information I'd like to share with you, and that is the Alerts and Workflow website. The website URL is simply alertsandworkflow.com, all spelled out. From here, you can get more information about the Sage Alerts and Workflow solution. But I'd like to specifically draw your attention to something in the lower middle part of the Alerts and Workflow homepage. You'll see a question that reads, does your organization need alerts and workflow? Click here to find out. By clicking here, you'll get brought into the Sage Alerts and Workflow Needs Assessment tool. It's a free tool. It takes approximately 5 to 10 minutes to go through it, and you can go through it multiple times. It asks you questions about the different business processes within your organization, asks how important they are to the success of your business, asks about the degree to which those processes are automated. And when you've finished answering all of these questions, you're provided with a needs assessment report card, showing you for all of the capabilities that Alerts and Workflow can offer, which of those capabilities are needed by your organization, and which of those capabilities are most urgently needed by your organization. I certainly invite you and encourage you to visit alertsandworkflow.com to go through this needs assessment tool. And so that brings us to the end of today's presentation on Sage Alerts and Workflow and how it can enable your organization to become more data-driven. My name is Don Farber. If you have any questions based upon what we've covered in today's presentation, feel free to contact me. You'll see my contact information there towards the bottom left of the current slide. And so I thank you very much for your time and attention today in learning about Sage Alerts and Workflow, and I very much look forward to the opportunity to work with your organization. Thanks very much.